Hikari was an antisocial bum who only goons to 2D girls until he accidentally rizzed up the hottest girl in school, making her confess to him. Now that he finally experiences the touch of a woman, he decides to clap real cheeks for the rest of his life. It all starts with Hikari frantically running to school, praying he doesn't ruin his perfect punctuality streak. Unfortunately, he ends up late and gets told to clean the pool with Iroha, an antisocial rebel. But unlike the average virgin nerd who would jump at an opportunity to be with her, Hikari gets even more upset because he hates being around disobedient hoes like her. To make matters worse, she suddenly calls his hair gross and walks into school while he stands there frozen by shame. In class, Hikari thinks there is no way a baddie who lives like an ex-convict would actually show up to clean the pool. Hours later, he gets there and is shocked to see her already cleaning. However, when he tries to join her and collect the cleaning rake, they both fall into the pool. After getting out of the water, Iroha offers to dry his shirt, but he refuses to take it off and gets shocked when he sees that she has already gone topless. Noticing the look on his face, she asks if he is a virgin, but instead of getting embarrassed, Hikari proudly owns up to his innocence and says there is nothing good about being a passed-around hoe. He also calls her insensitive for the way she insulted him earlier, but she claims to have completely forgotten that conversation. Pissed off, he cusses her out for always disrespecting virgins like him who only love virtual cheeks, but she finds this adorable and tells him to try falling in love, and leaves. Days later, he meets up with his only friend, Yuyudo, at a restaurant and asks if he's ever been in love. Yuyudo then reminds him that gooning to virtual cakes is much better than falling for real girls. The next moment, some of their classmates show up and start making fun of Yuyudo's lack of testosterone and femboy fashion. As they both continue mocking him, Hikari wonders why the girls can't just leave them alone. Hikari gets pissed and tells the girls to back off, but she decides to roast him even more instead. Just then, Iroha walks in and apologizes for being late before asking Hikari why he is talking to these ugly-looking girls. The girls try to clap back, but Iroha calmly tells her to take her scarecrow face elsewhere. Iroha then joins Hikari and Yuyudo to eat, and as they start talking, Yuyudo gets curious about their relationship since he hasn't seen Hikari with a real chick before. After they both explain that they just got punished together, Iroha compliments Yuyudo's hat and heads out, causing them both to realize that not all girls are bad. The following day at school, Hikari sees Iroha making out with a random guy and tries to sneak off, but then another senior shows up and accuses her of cheating. After the first guy apologizes and leaves, the other one tries to drag her away, but Hikari suddenly attacks despite his better judgment. Iroha quickly tells him to run because the guy is a black belt, but Hikari takes a brutal combination before he can even react. Despite this, he refuses to give up and continues fighting until Karate Kid puts him in snooze mode. After eventually waking up, Hikari tells Iroha not to worry about him, but then she repays his bravery by giving him his first real kiss. However, Hikari recalls that she was literally just kissing another guy moments ago and tells her to leave. The next day, Yuyudo sees his patched-up face and asks what happened. But just as Hikari tries to explain, Iroha walks in and asks him out. However, Hikari blows up thinking she's taking pity on him, prompting Iroha to calmly walk out. The next day, he sees her crying outside a hospital, so he spends the entire day stalking her. On the way, she enters a bookstore to shop, but the owner suddenly runs up and accuses her of stealing. When she starts stripping to prove her innocence, Hikari blocks her to make sure no one can see her jugs. After he explains everything she has done so far, the lady gets creeped out and decides to let them go. Once outside, he asks why she was crying earlier, but she refuses to answer. He then hands her his umbrella like a true gentleman, and she tells him she didn't ask to be his girlfriend out of pity before leaving. The next day, Hikari comes down with a fever, but still decides to go to school. However, he and Iroha end up late again and are punished to clean the pool one more time. After the teacher leaves, Iroha admits that she intentionally came late to help him out because she's the reason he got sick. He then tells her not to blame herself, but she suddenly pushes him against the lockers to kiss him so she can take his cold. After she leaves, Hikari realizes that this could be his one shot at love, so he runs to the pool and asks Iroha out. She then responds with a warm hug and says she plans to enjoy the next 6 months with him since she will be transferring to another school at the end of the term. Later, Hikari wonders if he is just wasting his time by dating her, but when Iroha asks to walk home together, he decides to just roll with it. The next day, when they walk through the halls, everyone watches in shock. barely believing that such a famous hottie would date the antisocial nerd everyone makes fun of. When one of the guys asks why she would ever date such a loser, Iroha confronts him. But Hikari quickly drags her to the lockers and tells her not to fight for him because it won't change anything. On the way home, she asks if he has any plans for the weekend. So he tells her about a new game coming out and says he intends to buy it and spend the weekend playing. That Saturday, he spends hours waiting in line and eventually gets the game, only to see Iroha across the street walking with a blue-eyed Chad. After dark, he hears a tapping sound on his window and sees Iroha calling out to him. So he follows her to a nearby park and reminds her that they were still going to see each other in school. She then says there is no point in dating if they only meet each other in school, and after he admits to not fully understanding the concept of dating, she decides to show it to him. Several minutes later, she takes him into a hotel room and sits on the bed to give him the night virgins like you have always dreamed of. After she says it's her first time, Hikari tries to stop her, only to end up pinning her down to the bed. Despite feeling the blood rushing to his Eiffel Tower, he manages to stay calm and asks why she is giving it up so easily if it's really her first time. She then says it's to help him understand how serious she is. So Hikari takes a good look at her hot body and starts losing his senses. However, he eventually manages to snap out of it and says he doesn't want to lose his V-card like it was nothing before heading out. After getting his meds from the hospital the next day, he walks past the bench where she was crying the other day and reminds himself that he doesn't even know Iroha that well. He then turns to leave and spots the blue-eyed Chad from yesterday, who is apparently a doctor. As soon as he discharges his patient, Hikari walks up and asks to speak with him, so the Isha joins him on the bench. When he brings up Iroha's name and says he is her boyfriend, Isha realizes why he wanted to talk and says he is not dating her. Hikari then asks if she just lets him hit for having blue eyes, and Isha says that it's nothing like that as well. After he says that it's also not something he can freely talk about, Hikari becomes convinced that they have a secret relationship, so he gets up and tells Isha to take care of her. Confused, Isha asks why he is not telling him to stay away, so Hikari explains how weak he is and says he is obviously no match for a hot, successful doctor. When Isha calls him a weakling and says he doesn't deserve a chick like Iroha, he suddenly runs off to hide his shame. At school the next day, he meets up with Iroha on the rooftop, and after she reminds him that he ditched her at the hotel, he apologizes before telling her to break up with Isha. She gets surprised by this, so he tells her about seeing them together the other day. The next moment, she admits to being Isha's girl and says she also lied about still being a virgin. But after letting those words sink in for a minute, she claims it was a lie to see how he would react. She then explains that Isha is a family doctor who has been treating a very serious illness she was born with. At home that night, he gets frustrated over not knowing what to do for Iroha, so he spends the entire night binge watching his favorite anime, hoping to receive some inspiration. The next morning, he finds Iroha at the lockers and promises to protect her with his life, no matter what. But she gets a little startled by this and says he is acting like a narcissist. After he backs up, she apologizes for exaggerating her condition yesterday because she only has asthma. She then hugs him to thank him for making the effort to look out for her. Later on, he meets up with Isha to apologize for his behavior the other day, and after realizing that he now knows the truth, Isha asks if he has started making preparations for Iroha's birthday since they are only a week away from it. After saying that he didn't even know about her birthday, Hikari asks Isha about what she likes, but Isha claims he doesn't have a clue and gets up to return to work. The next day, while walking home from school, Hikari starts asking Iroha for the things she likes, and after saying that she loves chocolate, she suddenly asks to come to his house. Minutes later, Hikari's mom, Kei, and his brother Kaoru freeze, struggle to believe their eyes and ears when he walks in and introduces Iroha as his girlfriend. After Kei begs Iroha to take care of him, they both head to his room, where she spends a couple of minutes looking around before asking to see his favorite anime. As she watches it and compliments his taste in anime, he thinks back to all the times he was mocked for watching anime and starts feeling lucky that he has a girl who doesn't judge him. Iroha also notices this and leans in to get close to him, but just as she tries to kiss him, Kei walks in and apologizes for intruding. At school the next day, he tells Yuyuto about her birthday because he still can't figure out a good gift to get her, so Yuyuto suggests making a clay figure. They both then spend 2 entire days without sleep working on it. When the day finally arrives, Kei gives Hikari 2 amusement park tickets just in case the gift scares Iroha away. And after thanking her, he heads to school and shows Iroha, who immediately suggests skipping school to go on the rides. After she convinces him, they head to the park, and Hikari's eyes light up as soon as he sees all the attractions because he hasn't been to a park in ages. Iroha then takes him on their first ride, but after minutes of pissing himself, he lies on a bench and questions the life choices that led to this tragic moment. After getting him a juice box, Iroha apologizes for not realizing that he can't stomach the roller coaster from the final destination. In a bid to make sure they still have fun, he decides to ride the Ferris wheel and uses that opportunity to give her the clay figure he spent days making with Yuyudo's help. When she asks why he added a magic wand, he explains how magical his life became after she became a part of it, and she responds by throwing herself at him for a kiss. Days later, Hikari experiences a dream where Iroha becomes a lot more intense and tries to ride his magic stick. After his virtual lover shows up to stop them, he falls off the bed and realizes that they both fell asleep while watching a movie. Just then, he sees her dump truck and decides to take a photo instead of waking her up for back shots. Eventually, though, he chickens out and wonders why he can't seem to control himself around her. Minutes later, she wakes up and sees that he covered her up, so she thanks him before heading home. At school the next day, Yuyudo finds him deep in thought and makes sure he is okay before reminding him that they both agreed to go shopping for games after school. After recalling that he also promised to walk home with Iroha, Hikari tries to apologize, but Yudo tells him not to worry about it. Just then, Hikari realizes that he is putting hoes before bros, so he stops Yuyudo from leaving and agrees to go shopping for games with him. Hours later, Iroha shows up to walk home together, so he breaks the bad news and gets shocked by how calmly she takes it. After he and Yuyudo get food at a restaurant, and when Yuyudo thanks him for hanging out again, he apologizes for being so distant and says he needs to stop being so obsessed with his new love life since an otaku like him was never meant to get lucky with girls. While playing sports the next day, Iroha tries to say hi to him, but he ignores her and walks off. Just then, another classmate named Arisa trips over a banana peel, so he tries to help her up, but she gets horrified the moment she sees his face. Yuyudo immediately runs over and apologizes for the way she behaves, but Hikari says it's no big deal since he is actually used to being hated by chicks like her. Hours later, Iroha shows up to his class and asks to stop by a store on their way home, but he tells her to go alone. When she tries to check on him, he smacks her hand away and immediately apologizes, but she starts feeling bad and asks if she did something to upset him. After he says it's nothing, she gets heartbroken and leaves, while he folds himself into the chair and wonders why he can't seem to get anything right. Moments later, Arisa notices and asks if he wants to unalive himself, so he takes the opportunity to ask if she has ever been in love. Naturally, she gets shocked by the sudden question, but decides to tell him a little bit about her love life. The next day, Hikari tries to go home with Iroha and gets brutally shut down, so he heads back to class and sulks until Arisa sees him again and asks if his relationship is already over. After he says it might be, she asks why he has never tried to change his stupid haircut, and immediately gets him set up for a new cut. When he tries to stop her, she assures him that it's not her first time cutting her with a crusty pair of scissors. However, just as she starts the makeover, Iroha walks in and stops her before that no one is allowed to touch her man. After she also tells Hiraki not to let any chick touch him, Arisa tells her to relax because no one actually wants her man, but Iroha insists that she might like him after actually getting to know him. After Arisa leaves, Iroha apologizes for being so hostile earlier and says she can't stop thinking that he now hates her. But Hikari admits that he is the insecure one who still hasn't learned to accept that she is in love with him. Later that night, he joins his mom in the living room to watch a show, and after she asks about his relationship and says she spent ages praying for him to be a normal boy, he wonders if becoming an average guy like everybody else is really what he wants. He then notices how hyped his mom gets to watch a show about hot guys cooking and prays the movie set gets burned down with the actors still inside. However, on the way home from school the following afternoon, Iroha tells him that she is also a fan of the show because she has always loved guys who cook. Hikari then proceeds to spend the rest of the day channeling his inner Gordon Ramsay, while Kei wonders if she knows her own son anymore. During lunch the next day, Iroha and Yuyudo are shocked by how good his snacks taste. And when Arisa shows up, Iroha invites her to join them and apologizes for the way she acted the other day. After accepting the apology, Arisa joins them and asks Iroha why she doesn't have other friends, so Iroha reminds her that she became popular for stealing boyfriends and clapping anything with a third leg. Surprisingly, Arisa says she already knew that it was just a baseless rumor because a professional hoe would not get so jealous over someone like Hikari. Iroha then says there is no point in trying to have friends now since she will be gone in the next 6 months. With nothing else to talk about, Hikari asks Arisa about her love life. So she spends a couple of minutes yapping about how cool her new man is before leaving to talk with him in the hallway. The next day, Shun shows up to class to ask her for some money, and when Hikari notes that it's wrong, Iroha tells him to stay out of it since it doesn't concern them. He then spends the next couple of days perfecting his cooking to the point that both Iroha and Yuyuto realize that he is really talented. However, as they all talk about it in the hallway, Shun meets up with a buddy of his to talk about how Arisa stayed cool with him after seeing another chick's clothes at his place. Once again, they all decide to mind their business as long as Arisa is happy with him. But then she shows up and admits that she is selling herself short by still letting him hit her despite everything. After she claims to be happy with it, Shun calls her stupid for also giving him money whenever he asks. But this causes Iroha to lose it, so she walks over to him and smashes his face with her bag. Much later, she tells them that Shun decided to break up with her and suddenly starts bawling her eyes out, so Hikari and Yuyuto scramble to console her. Thankfully, the treats Hikari made for lunch do the trick, and while eating, Iroha assures her that someone better will eventually show up because she is actually a really good judge of character. Upon hearing this, Arisa jumps into her arms and continues crying, while Hikari realizes that being a regular guy isn't so bad. Days later, Iroha complains about how much she currently struggles in class and asks him to tutor her, so he calmly accepts while losing his mind to excitement. After, they get back to his room to start the lesson, and after figuring out what her problem is, Hikari realizes that good looks might be Iroha's only talent. While trying to come up with a solution, he starts paying extra attention to her features and completely forgets what they are meant to be doing until she snaps him out of it and asks for help. At this point, Hikari realizes that he can't help himself, so he asks to sit beside her and imagines grabbing her melons before running back and apologizing for making such a weird request. Just then, Iroha starts blushing, and he notices, but when he asks, she says it was nothing. So he hugs her and decides to stay for her sake since she really needs the lesson. Upon seeing this, Kei and Kaoru slowly sneak in to catch them making out, but Hikari spots them and asks why they can't act like a normal family. On his way to class the next day, Hikari fails to notice another student named Misuya who has been talking trash about him and wondering why Iroha would ever choose to date such a geek. At the lockers moments later, Hikari finds a love letter and tries to wrap his head around it when Arisa shows up and asks when he started getting so good with the ladies. He immediately tells her that it's obviously a trap because whoever wrote it just wants to humiliate him in front of her friends. But she tells him to stop being such a self-hater and says that Iroha's decision to date him probably gave other chicks courage to step up. After considering the fact that the person who wrote it might be waiting to see him, he decides to go meet them, only to see Misuya, who then asks why Iroha chose him. When he suddenly tells Hikari to give her up, Hikari tries to talk back, so Misuya pins him to the wall to establish dominance and says he has always gotten whatever he wants. This causes Hikari to get pissed, so he admits to hating guys like Misuya, who always think the looks they were born with give them the right to do whatever they want. The next moment, Misuya cuts his lights out, and after eventually waking up, Hikari puts on a mask to hide the bruises and tells Yuyuto that he will be leaving early. Minutes later, he ends up at the park thinking about his life when he hears a little girl crying. After learning that she lost her older brother, he tries to help her find him, but then Misuya shows up and tries to attack him for talking to his sister. He then tells Anzu to never talk to an ugly creep like him ever again, but Hikari loses it and calls him an incompetent brother for losing sight of her. He then asks Misuya what he plans to do with Iroha, and after Misuya calmly says that he will show her what she is missing by dating a weak simp, Hikari accepts defeat. However, he suddenly teases the idea of spreading lies about Misuya online to prove that he can actually do something, and this causes Misuya to lose it. The next moment, he spots a cop passing by and tells Anzu to scream before begging the cop for help and acting like he was messing around with Anzu. After the cop tackles Hikari and pulls him aside for questioning, Misuya pulls his phone out to destroy what's left of Hikari's already ruined reputation. At school the next day, everyone in class gets shocked to see him and asks why such a creep would even be permitted back on campus. Surprised, Hikari wonders if they suddenly decided to hate him even more. But after seeing a picture of him with the cops, he realizes what happened and calmly walks to his seat. Moments later, Iroha shows up to talk, so he takes her outside and tells her to stop coming to see him for her own sake. When she claims not to care if he is into girls like Anzu, he thanks her for being supportive and explains that it's actually a lie before insisting that she keep her distance from now on. Much later, Yuyudo finds him in class again and promises to support him regardless of what anyone else says. Arisa, on the other hand, says she regrets talking to him and storms out in anger. Around the same time, Misuya finds Iroha at the lockers, but she immediately tells him that Hikari is enough for her and turns to leave. After he grabs her hand and asks why she is turning him down for a creep, she says her reasons are none of his business and asks him to stop trying because she will never give a liar her time of day. As she walks off, the overconfident player gets overwhelmed by shock as he never expected a girl to turn him down. Meanwhile, Anzu runs into Kaoru on the way home from school and tries to hang out. But he refuses and says his life is over because his older brother is officially a criminal. Concerned, Anzu asks why he is so upset, so Kaoru reluctantly tells her what happened with Hikari. By then, Hikari has just gotten home, so Kei expresses her disappointment and refuses to believe a word he says, so he heads up to his room to spend the rest of the night locked away. Eventually, he decides to call the one person who makes his day better, and despite being surprised, Iroha asks if she can help with anything. He then tells her to find someone else to date because everyone is right about him being weird, even if the current incident is a lie. As he further tries to explain how much better her life would be with someone else, she stops him and says there is no point in trying to be with anyone else because she is certain that no one will ever be as caring and devoted as him. She also tells him to stop seeing his awkwardness as a bad thing because it's what makes him special. Hearing this causes Hikari to tear up for the first time since he had long accepted that he would always be unloved. In class the next day, everyone asks why he is still showing up and resumes the trash talk. But he suddenly remembers what Iroha said and starts laughing, causing everyone to get a lot more concerned about his mental state. When Iroha shows up to see him again, he still insists that she keep her distance until everything blows over, so she decides to head home alone. However, on her way out, Anzu runs past her and trips, so she stops to help her up. Just then, Misuya runs over and grabs Iroha's hands to thank her, but she tells him to let go because she just did what any responsible person would. As she turns to leave, Anzu tells Misuya that Kaoru has refused to hang out with her ever since he made her scream at the park to get Hikari in trouble with the cops. As she cries and begs him to do something, he starts shaking in fear because any hope of clapping Iroha just went up in smoke. This time, she pins him to the wall to demand answers, and Anzu also suggests coming clean about what really happened so she can fix her relationship with Kaoru, but Misuya refuses and runs off. Anzu then tells Iroha that she desperately wants to make Kaoru feel better, so Iroha promises to do something about it. While walking to class the next day, Hikari hears everyone calling him slurs and still yapping about how he tried to take Anzu home. But then he runs into Misuya, who immediately says he will never apologize and claims the whole thing was just a joke. As Misuya tries to avoid taking the blame again, two of his friends show up and ask why he is talking to the creepiest guy on campus. So Misuya immediately switches up and acts like Hikari was the one trying to start a conversation. Much later, Yuyudo tries to walk home with Hikari, and when he refuses like always, Yuyudo insists, and Iroha also shows up to join them. After, they both end up in his room, where Iroha tells him about the conversation with Misuya and asks why he didn't just tell her what happened. After saying that he didn't see the point, Hikari admits to feeling happy that he didn't need to defend himself to her, and she comforts him with a hug before saying the 3 magic words to make his heart skip. Just as he tries to kiss her, Kaoru shows up and asks Hikari how he can be so carefree when their lives are getting destroyed by the day. Hikari then tries to explain, but Kaoru loses it and says he will never be like him before storming out. The next day, Hikari sees that they have turned his locker into a frog den and decides to ignore it, along with the countless junk being tossed at his head. When someone suddenly throws a hard-boiled egg at his face, he stops to question whether or not his life is at risk. But then Misuya shows up and demands to know why he isn't fighting back. After Hikari tells him to stop acting guilty when he can't own up to his lies, the same guys from yesterday show up again and start teasing Misuya for talking to Hikari. This time, Masuya loses it and tries to fight. But then Hikari stops him and tells the guys that he would never want to talk with a spineless normie before leaving. This surprises Masuya, so he follows Hikari out to talk. But our boy gets frustrated and asks why he won't stop stalking him. Masuya then starts ranting about how he needs to stand up for himself again. But Hikari insists that there is no point since he has never actually cared about what people think of him. After getting up to leave, he tells Masuya not to bother revealing the truth to everyone because it's clear that his entire life revolves around maintaining his pretty boy facade. However, after recalling that the rumors are also affecting his life at home, he takes Masuya home to explain what really happened to Kei and Kaoru. While Kei immediately gets relieved to hear that her son is not Japan's version of R. Kelly, Kaoru still blames Hikari for being too nonchalant to care about his reputation at school. After, they all head out, and when Arisa suddenly shows up, Hikari asks Masuya to tell her the truth as well, since she is one of his only friends. However, just as he walks up to tell her, she gets soaked in the nether region and asks for his number so they can talk later. The next morning, Hikari struggles to drag himself to school because he spent all night watching Azamichi's new series. The next moment, he bumps into a chick named Sumi, and after they both scramble to find the glasses, she helps him pack his books and apologizes for being so clumsy. As expected, he tells her not to worry and immediately heads out. But then she spots the latest edition of Azamichi comic and realizes that he is a cultured otaku just like her. Minutes later, he starts panicking at the park because he just emptied his bag and still can't find the comic. Thankfully, Sumi finds him and returns it. But after he thanks her, she suddenly starts yapping about loving anime and asks for his favorite series. When Iroha shows up to walk to school with him, Sumi panics and apologizes for thinking he was a loner like her and runs off before he can say anything. Iroha then asks if he wants to go to a festival later on, and since he has already finished the latest Azamichi series, he agrees to it. Later that night, he shows up to the festival in a yukata he probably stole from Kei's dresser, but Iroha decides to ignore his nauseating taste in fashion so they can enjoy the night together. After minutes of playing only the kind of games he likes, Hikari apologizes for getting carried away and asks if she is having any fun. But Iroha says she actually prefers watching him have fun. Much later, they spot Anzu and Masuya having fun together, so Hikari decides that it's the perfect opportunity to ask Iroha why she didn't go for him when he first asked her out. Iroha gets pissed off by this and asks why he always considered himself to be inferior to the likes of Masuya. But he gets confused by her anger and says he just wanted to ask. After saying that she would have dated hot guys if she wanted to, Iroha walks off and completely avoids him the next day in school. While trying to call her, he bumps into Sumi, who then apologizes for yapping yesterday, but he tells her not to worry about it and lists some of his favorite series to answer questions before promising to talk about it more when he has time to spare. Much later, he gives up on trying to find Iroha. But then Arisa shows up and tells him to get back to class so they can figure out a way to pair her up with Masuya. Moments later, Hikari sees that they have already turned his table into a tombstone as another way of mocking him. So he tries to dispose of the flowers, only to overhear two boys talking about how Sumi's body is the only thing good about her. After walking past them, he bumps into Sumi and immediately continues their earlier conversation about anime until she starts bawling her eyes out. He panics and tries to stop her, but she explains that it has always been hard to communicate with others, which is why she lost her cool after learning that he shared some of her interests. She also tells him about how everyone in class treats her like a weirdo, and since he can relate, he gives her the flowers as a consolation gift and tells her to at least feel better that they find her attractive. He then continues walking down the hall and comes face to face with Arisa before getting knocked down and having his nuts crushed because she thinks he was flirting with Sumi. After the beatdown, he finally finds Iroha and apologizes for having an inferiority complex. But she tells him that it was never about that and gets pissed that he still can't understand why she was upset. As she turns to leave, he holds her back and begs her to just tell him what he did wrong because he obviously can't read her mind. But she insists that he is just making up excuses to avoid accountability. He then accuses her of being the insensitive one and immediately regrets it. But she leaves before he can apologize. The next morning, he continues thinking of a solution on his way into school and spots Sumi with her plants, so he stops to say hi. She then thanks him for his kind words from yesterday and says she feels a lot better about herself before giving him a bag of potatoes to show her appreciation. Minutes later, he finally gets to class and wishes he could be as expressive as Sumi before recalling that he has another friend who might be able to salvage his love life. After classes, he tries to get some advice, but Yuyudo says he has something important to do and tells him to just go eat with her and talk it out. After Hikari finishes his lunch alone, and decides to go see what Yuyudo is up to since they haven't hung out in a while. After finding him talking to a stray cat about games, he jumps in and apologizes for not giving him enough attention because only severe depression and loneliness would lead him to think a starving cat cares about his Call of Duty skins. When Yuyudo says it's not like that, Hikari insists that it's definitely a reaction to being so alone. But then Yuyudo loses it and tells him to stop thinking that he can't have a life beyond their friendship. After he storms out, Hikari heads back home and spends the rest of the evening experiencing his first existential crisis as he realizes that the only two people he talks to no longer want to be around him. In a bid to cure his loneliness, he decides to make something with the potatoes Sumi gave him. While doing so, he thinks back to the first day Yuyudo spoke to him and how he completely ignored him to maintain his peaceful antisocial life. After a classmate asked Yuyudo for his assignment, another loser suddenly yanked Hikari's earphones and tossed them out the window. When Yuyudo asked why they were being mean to him, the first guy explained how weird Hikari was and told him to keep his distance. Despite this, Yuyudo helped him find the earphones later on, but after taking them back, Hikari told him to stop trying to talk to him because he had no intentions of becoming friends with him. This causes Yuyudo to get pissed, but Hikari insists on being left alone and goes back to class. Later that day, the teacher asked for a volunteer to make welcome banners for the new students, and after no one offered to do it, one of the guys made Yuyudo volunteer. The teacher then said he still needed someone else, so another dude suggested Hikari since he was definitely not going to speak up for himself. After classes, Yuyudo waited and had just given up hope when Hikari showed up and said he was looking for his shoes. As they both started working on the posters, Hikari admitted that he only came because Yuyudo helped him with his earphones. Just then, the two guys from before walked past and joked about how Yuyudo was only useful because he let them copy his assignments. Upon hearing this, Yuyudo claimed he was okay with it, so Hikari decided to mind his business. But while walking home together, he asked if being friends with those guys was that important to Yuyudo. After Yuyudo said he just simply likes being nice to everyone, Hikari told him to try being nice to people who actually deserved it, because being hated by others wasn't as bad as he thought. In class the next day, the same guys showed up again, but while the first one tried to get another assignment, Yuyudo saw the second bully ripping up Hikari's new comic, so he shoved him in anger and took a nasty punch that left his nose bleeding for the rest of the day. By late afternoon, he had regained enough strength to talk again, and after joking about it with Hikari, he promised to always hang out with him. After the trip down memory lane, Hikari decides to make it up to him no matter what. At school the next day, Hikari apologizes for being so insensitive and also admits that he was the one who felt lonely without his first real friend. After Yuyudo accepts his apology, they both share the potato dumplings he made. Hikari then tries to see Iroha, but when she spots him, he panics and decides to head home alone since he still doesn't know why she hates his guts. However, just before reaching his house, he decides to try something else and quickly gets changed before tracking down her house. After several minutes of looking for his balls, he chickens out, but thankfully, she opens the door and asks why he has been standing outside her house. He then walks over to give her some of the dumplings and says he still can't apologize since he doesn't know what he did. As he turns to leave, she stops him and admits that the silent treatment has gone on for way too long before taking him inside. Moments later, he enters her room and immediately starts caressing her bed before she walks in and asks if he's okay. As she then sits on a mat, he realizes that she is barely covered and freaks out. But she finds it funny and says she is no longer upset. She further explains that she just didn't like the fact that he still doubts her love for him, because anyone with common sense would see that he is an amazing guy. The next moment, she kisses him, and after a couple of minutes of smooching, she hugs him. But he suddenly gets excited and pushes her down to unleash his inner beast. However, after seeing the shocked look on her face, he panics and apologizes before running out. The next day, he sees her at the lockers and tells her to stay back before running away again, while she wonders why he always overreacts to the smallest things. After stopping at the garden, he sees Sumi and decides to share some dumplings with her as well since she gave him the potatoes. As they both start talking, Iroha, who is currently on her way to class, hears them and watches until Arisa spots her and asks why she is standing by the window. When she gets close enough to see what is going on, Iroha runs into her arms and asks why this is happening. On the roof, minutes later, Arisa excitedly asks for all the details and promises to give the best advice since Iroha has never seen her as the dependable type before. After listening, she suggests telling Hikari to never talk to another girl again, but Iroha refuses and says she can't just bark orders at him, especially because she has never done that before. Upon hearing this, Arisa gets frustrated and says she never expected to hear that from the hottest girl in school. She then tries to convince Iroha that it's the best option, but when Iroha tries to leave, she pulls her back and says someone like Hikari will easily understand her concerns if she calmly explains them to him. Minutes later, Hikari gets worried because she called him out to talk and hasn't said a single word ever since. After a couple more minutes of silence, she asks about his relationship with Sumi and why he seemed to be having fun with her after what happened between them last night. Hikari gets surprised by the sudden question and tries to come up with an answer, but Iroha starts feeling embarrassed and tries to leave. So he stops her and says he just likes talking with Sumi occasionally since they share similar interests. Despite this, Iroha still pulls away from him and runs off, but after returning to the same window from before to watch Sumi, she sees two bullies pour water all over her and act like they did it by accident. As they both act concerned about her, Sumi tells them not to worry about it since she hasn't changed into her school clothes yet, so they head back to class while she tries to squeeze the water out. The next moment, Iroha shows up to give her a napkin and apologizes for what just happened, but Sumi tells her not to worry since it happens all the time. She then thanks Iroha for the napkin and says she never expected Hikari's hot girlfriend to be so kind as well. This causes Iroha to realize that she was completely wrong about her, so she apologizes for suddenly showing up and tells her to get changed quickly before heading back inside. Meanwhile, Hikari, who has just returned to class, beats himself up over how bad Iroha probably feels because he felt the same way when he saw her with Isha. All of a sudden, Kazumichi escapes her two-dimensional world and tells him to go make sure Iroha feels loved. So Iroha heads towards the door and finds her already waiting to see him. Much later, she explains everything to him in the park and says she is already over it since she now knows what kind of relationship he has with Sumi. She also apologizes for not trusting him just weeks after getting upset with him for doing the same thing, but he tells her not to worry about it and blames himself for giving her a reason to doubt his love. The next day in class, Arisa suddenly pins him to the wall and demands to know why he was still giving Sumi dumplings after she clearly told him not to. As he tries to explain that Sumi gave him the potatoes in the first place, Sumi shows up, so Arisa decides to interrogate her instead. However, when Sumi suddenly calls her pretty and asks why all of Hikari's friends look so good, Arisa decides that she can be trusted and asks why she is here. Sumi then shows them the tomatoes she got for Hikari, and when he tells he that she can't keep giving him food, she explains that it's her only option since she can't possibly use every harvested crop. Just then, Yuyuto shows up, and after getting curious about his cat ears, Hikari tries to introduce them to each other, but Yuyuto immediately removes himself from the classroom, so Hikari tells Sumi that he is usually shy around strangers. During lunch the next day, they all find Sumi in the garden again and ask her to join them for lunch. She gets shocked by the sudden request and is even more surprised to see that Hikari has already used her tomatoes to make jelly. However, while they all start to eat, she sees that Yuyuto has barely touched his food and apologizes for troubling him with her presence. Upon hearing this, Arisa asks why he wasn't shy when she first joined their group, so Hikari reminds her that a lot was happening back then. When Sumi suddenly offers Hikari some eggplant as a thank you gift for inviting her, he tells he that she never has to pay or give them anything to eat lunch together. After everyone else agrees with him, Sumi starts fighting back her tears, so Iroha and Yuyuto give her their napkins. The next day, Hikari shows up at the garden to check on her, and after she assures him that she was just a little emotional, he tells her to stay still because something got stuck to her hair. As he leans in to grab it, she realizes why Iroha is so obsessed with him and almost loses consciousness from his unintentional riz. But then he screams because there is a caterpillar on her hair. She then grabs it and tells him not to worry because it's apparently her friend, so he heads back to class while she wonders why her heart was beating so fast. Later, Iroha asks Hikari to spend his Saturday with her, but he apologizes because he already has plans with Yuyuto. As she turns to leave, he pulls her back and asks if she wants to join them, but she fakes a smile and tells him not to worry about it. On Saturday morning, Kei gives him some extra money to shop for clothes and tells him to stop dressing like a peasant, so he reluctantly takes the money before meeting up with Yuyudo. After several minutes of trying to understand fashion, they both spot Masuya, so Hikari stops him and asks for help getting a new outfit. Despite hating the idea of being around nerds like them, Masuya agrees and takes them to a local mall to get clothes. On the way home afterwards, they hear a cafe maid trying to advertise the new business and are shocked to see that the hottie is actually Sumi. While Yuyudo struggles to believe his eyes, she tells Hikari that she picked up a part-time job to get extra cash for something personal. All of a sudden, two down-bad creeps try to take her aside for some special service, so Hikari steps in to defend her while Yuyudo continues watching the action unfold and realizes that it's probably why he is still single. Much later, Hikari starts heading home with Yuyuto, but after recalling that Iroha wanted to see him, he apologizes and runs to the park to see her. Minutes later, she shows up and admits to being surprised to see his call, so he says he just didn't want her to feel ignored. The next day, Hikari meets up with Yuyudo to walk to school together, and when Sumi suddenly runs past them, they stop her to ask if she is okay. She then thanks Hikari for yesterday and says she has something important to do before running off. Later, Iroha tells them about a camping trip at her family's resort, and while Hikari tries to talk his way out of going, Iroha and Yuyudo admit that it's actually a really nice idea, leaving him no choice but to join. After Iroha tells Hikari to invite Masuya, Yuyudo heads out and wonders how Sumi would react if he invites her. Days later, Hikari reminisces on the first time he went camping and how miserable he was the entire time. Just then, Arisa kicks him into the water and tells him to get back to the cabin because they still have a lot of cleaning to do. After everyone else finishes up with their side of the cabin, and when Sumi asks Arisa if there's anything else to do, Arisa recalls how she pulled up dressed like a wildlife activist and tells her to relax a little. By then, Masuya has also started to question his decision to join them on the trip, so Hikari reminds him that he is still paying for the lies he spread. After making sure the entire house is clean, Arisa decides to get started with the food, so Hikari and Yuyudo put on their best hunter's outfits and ask what kind of meat she wants. After telling them to try touching grass more often, she asks if any of them can cook. Masuya and Sumi raise their hands, but naturally, her eyes only notice Masuya, so Sumi tries to run off. But she quickly apologizes and tells her to hand the vegetables to Yuyudo, while Hikari and Iroha set the table. In the kitchen moments later, Masuya tries to focus on preparing the meat, but Arisa suddenly starts asking about his love life to figure out why he is still single. When she suddenly offers to be his girlfriend, he immediately says no and explains how unattracted he is to her. So she finds a chair and takes a time out to process the brutal heartbreak. Much later, they all sit at the table to eat, and after Sumi suddenly starts crying because of how much fun they have been having, Yuyudo and Iroha also admit that they feel a little emotional. Arisa and Masuya, on the other hand, start to question their decision to join the nerd squad. After Masuya sees Iroha doing the dishes, he offers to help, but she tells him to leave them, so he asks if she still hates him. She then says she will always despise the fact that he exists because of what he did to Hikari, so he reminds her that he already apologized and also admits that Hikari isn't as bad as he initially thought. He also says they both look good together, but Iroha once again tells him that his opinions are irrelevant before heading out. Later, she joins Hikari to watch as the others fish from the river. Yuyudo gets impressed watching Sumi fish, and when she compliments her skill level, she claims it's just something she picked up from her dad. While he continues admiring her, she sneaks glances at Hikari and gets a little jealous that Iroha gets to spend all this time with him. Just then, Arisa picks up an awesomely looking shrimp and freaks out, so Masuya tries telling her to relax, but she bumps into Sumi, and they both fall into the water. Much later, they dry off by a fire, and while Hikari teases Arisa for always getting people wet, Sumi shares some of her fish with Yuyudo. After asking her to call him by his regular name, he suddenly runs to hide in a shed and realizes that he is feeling the same way Hikari felt when he first realized that he liked Iroha. Hours later, Hikari suggests playing a card game or any kind of game since they all can't seem to fall asleep. And as usual, Arisa tries to tease him, but he refuses to accept her jokes this time and heads to the kitchen to get the snacks he brought. Sumi also offers to make tea and leaves with him, so Arisa takes the opportunity to ask Iroha if she is having any fun. Just as Iroha thanks her for suggesting the camping trip, they hear Sumi screaming and rush to the kitchen. where Hikari is currently running cold water over her bruised hand. After realizing that she spilled hot water on herself, Misuya runs off to get medicine while Yuyuto goes to find some ice. As Hikari stays with her to make sure it doesn't hurt, her stomach butterflies spiral out of control. But then she notices that Iroha has been watching her closely and suddenly pulls away from him. After Misuya returns and senses the awkward tension, Yuyuto grabs the ice and also realizes that Sumi has a thing for Hikari, so he drops the ice with Misuya and runs off. Iroha also heads to the balcony and sees Yuyuto crouched on the floor, so she asks if he is okay. After he counters with the exact same question, they both decide not to talk about it. But then Arisa shows up and suggests going back inside since it's cold out. Yuyuto agrees and heads inside, but Iroha says she still needs a couple of minutes to think. So Arisa returns with a blanket to cover her up before asking why she suddenly walked out. Iroha says it was nothing, but Arisa tells her to stop the cap and explains that she can easily understand everything about her mood swings. She then says it's definitely because of the way Sumi was blushing, but Iroha suddenly tries to go inside to avoid the conversation. After holding her back, Arisa tells her to just have a conversation with Hikari about it. But Iroha refuses and reminds her of what happened the last time she brought it up. Arisa then says they only had a problem because she waited until the pain became unbearable before speaking up. Just then, Misuya shows up with a deck of cards, so they all return to the living room to pass the time with a quick game. However, only Hikari and Misuya seem to be enjoying the game, so Arisa tosses the cards and tells them to stop playing. The next moment, Sumi says she wants to head to bed because she feels a little sick. And after Arisa checks and realizes that she is running up a fever, Iroha takes her up to the room to look after her. Minutes later, Sumi gets back up and says she has been thinking of the right way to return her napkin. Iroha then tells her to keep it, but she refuses and places it on her chest while shedding tears, and starts crying before admitting something super important that shocks Iroha. Moments later, Iroha leaves the room, and Hikari, who was just about to enter, thanks her for taking care of Sumi. When she suddenly starts crying, he asks if she is okay, but she pulls back and blames him for everything before running out of the cabin. Arisa then kicks Hikari down the stairs and calls him stupid for making her cry before ordering him to go find her. After several minutes of looking, he ends up with nothing, so Arisa joins him while Yuyuto and Misuya head back inside to look after Sumi. When she hears what happened, she gets upset and says it's because she admitted to being in love with Hikari. Upon hearing this, Misuya says he never expected her to be the type to get in between lovers, but Yuyuto immediately tells him to can it since that is all he ever does. While they continue talking about it, Hikari gets pissed at himself because he apparently still can't figure out how he always makes Iroha upset. After another beating, she decides to take a less violent approach and asks him to consider how his kindness to everyone else affects the one person who constantly needs reassurance. While still searching for Iroha, Hiraki starts to realize that getting a girlfriend isn't as easy as he once thought it was. To make matters worse, he still has no idea what he did to make her upset this time. But after finally seeing her, he immediately covers her up and apologizes for everything. Just as she tries to stop him, Arisa shows up and tells them to continue the apologies in the cabin. So they head back and tell the others that she was just looking for wild vegetables. While Yuyuto and Misuya accept the obvious lie, Sumi tries to apologize, but Iroha insists that she was looking for veggies and walks past her. Arisa then tries to take her inside, but she suddenly collapses, so Arisa decides that she has to go to the hospital first thing in the morning. Several minutes later, Hiraki takes Iroha out to the porch to apologize again, but this time, she stops him and says she was actually wrong this time. Shocked, he asks how, so she reminds him of the time she said she didn't like how he treated everyone else nicely. After explaining that it makes her a bad person for thinking that way, she apologizes, but Hiraki gets confused again and asks for a break so he can wrap his head around everything she just said. This time, she tells him not to worry if he can't understand it and heads inside to sleep. Meanwhile, Arisa joins Misuya on the couch and complains about how what was meant to be a fun getaway got ruined again because of relationship drama. When Misuya asks why she acts like she doesn't care, she admits to being concerned about the recent fight between Hikari and Iroha. He then tells her to try getting her own love life instead of obsessing over someone else's, so she asks him out again, and he immediately rejects her. Just then, Hikari dashes in and asks if his kindness to others is really such a big deal. Also, Arisa asks if he will take responsibility when someone inevitably falls in love with him. Hikari immediately dismisses that, saying that no one besides Iroha has ever liked him. So Arisa tries to make it easy to understand by asking how he would react if Iroha were nice to everyone. After thinking about it, he says he will definitely feel a little sad, but never jealous to the point where he stops talking to her. Arisa and Masuya then tell him to go do whatever he wants because it's clear that he still doesn't have the mental capacity to understand how feelings work. The next morning, Yuyudo sees Sumi heading to the train station, so he decides to join her. Minutes later, she offers him an orange and thanks him for choosing to be by her side after she basically ruined the camping trip for everyone. After he tells her not to worry about him, she defends her decision to tell Iroha about her feelings and says she will also be confessing to Hikari because they will definitely break up sooner or later. Around the same time, Hikari hops on a train to head home as well, and after thinking about how bad things have gotten with Iroha, he decides to fix it no matter what. While thinking about how he has always had a hard time understanding people, he thinks back to a time when a girl named Julia suddenly became interested in his drawings. She would always visit him in class to see what he was working on, and everyone eventually started joking about how they were a couple. Years later, he was still drawing, hoping to impress her, but she suddenly joined everyone else to treat him like he was a weirdo for still drawing random anime characters. In school the next day, he tracks Iroha down to talk, but she tells him not to bother since his brain is too slow to process basic information. After stopping her from leaving, he panics and loses the confidence he spent all night building up. Just then, Sumi sends him a text, and he foolishly decides to respond right in front of Iroha, who didn't even know that they already had each other's numbers. To make matters worse, he leaves her to go see Sumi at the garden, and while she starts to accept that he might have a thing with Sumi, he meets up with her and asks if she still has a fever. After telling him not to worry about it, she apologizes for how things are with Iroha, and after thanking her for the concern, he asks if she has any idea of why Iroha is pissed because he still can't figure it out. When she suddenly says it's because of her confession, he misunderstands and thinks she wants to get freaky with his girl. However, when he asks for an explanation, she properly confesses her love for him, causing his brain to spaz out as he never expected to hear those words from anyone besides Iroha. All of a sudden, he bolts and sits by the lockers to think until Yuyudo shows up and asks if he is okay. When he starts thanking Yuyudo for being his friend and says he is definitely the one at fault, Yuyudo realizes that Sumi already confessed and asks how he responded, so Hikari admits that he ran away like a coward. Yuyudo then loses it and calls him selfish for not recognizing the amount of courage it took for Sumi to confess to him. After he runs off, Hikari returns home and asks his mom if being slow and clueless is a genetic trait in their family, but Kei explains that she and his dad were actually popular in their prime, meaning that his lack of social skills and common sense is completely his fault. The next day, he meets up with Arisa for a tough conversation, and she immediately knocks the daylight out of him before he even completes a sentence. After saying that he deserves the beating this time, he explains how difficult it is to always understand what he is meant to say or do, especially because he has never had so many close relationships at the same time. For once, Iroha decides not to berate him and rubs his head instead before also admitting that she doesn't always have to attack him for being himself. While they continue talking, Masuya finds Iroha on the roof, so he joins her and asks if she is still stressed over Hikari. He then suggests breaking up and dating someone with a little more experience because Hikari is obviously too innocent to understand certain things. She then refuses and says his innocence is part of the reason she finds it easy to commit to and trust him. However, she also admits that her inability to fully trust him is the main reason they keep getting into fights. Later on, Sumi gets a text from Hikari apologizing for the way he ran off, and also explaining that he had never confessed to before, which is why he got caught off guard and didn't know how to respond. He then sends another text asking to meet at the garden tomorrow, so he can give her a response. The next day, they meet up in the garden, and after an unusually long period of silence, Sumi gets tired of waiting and tells Hikari to just get it over with. He then starts by reminding her that his unusual response was because no one had ever confessed to him the way she did. He also claims not to be the knight in shining armor she thinks he is, but she insists that he has always been perfect in her eyes. After realizing that it's probably why she needs glasses, Hikari starts explaining how dark and miserable his life was before Iroha stepped into the picture. She was the one who taught him what it means to have relationships with people in the real world and also helped him experience emotions he never knew were possible. as he continues using gamer logic to make sure she understands. Iroha, who has been secretly listening to them, starts losing confidence and fears that he is about to choose Sumi over her. However, after a couple more minutes of yapping, he walks over to the bush where Iroha is hiding and drags her out before telling Sumi that she is the one he loves. Upon hearing his, Sumi claims to still be happy that he is the first boy she ever confessed to. After she suddenly gets weak in the knees, Iroha tries to help, but she says it just took a lot to have this conversation. Hikari also drops to his knees and says the same thing. So Arisa once again starts to wonder why she became friends with oversensitive nerds like them. After, Iroha takes Hikari to a tree and asks him to say the magic words again, so he admits to being in love with he, but she gets embarrassed and hides her face. He then pulls her face up and says he is the one who should be embarrassed before kissing her. Meanwhile, Yuyudo finds Sumi sitting by herself, and after she tells him about what happened, he offers her a napkin for her tears. After drenching it with tears, she thanks him for always being around when she needs him the most. And while he comforts her, two juniors watch them from the window and start calling them the weirdo couple. Just then, Arisa bumps knees with one of them and asks why they are laughing when they both look worse than Pennywise. The next moment, Misuya shows up and sends the girls away with his perfect face before asking Arisa why she is verbally assaulting juniors. She then tells him what just happened, and as they both watch Yuyudo and Sumi, she tries to shoot her shot again, but immediately rejects her. Hours later, Hikari is surprised to see Yuyudo waiting for him outside and tries to apologize for what happened last time, but Yuyudo beats him to it and admits that he overreacted. He then tells Hikari that he recently fell for a girl and is naturally surprised by Hikari, so he asks for all the details, but Yuyudo tells him not to worry since he is probably not going to ever do anything with her. Upon hearing this, Hikari invites him for a sleepover so they can catch up like old times, but Kaoru takes Yuyudo away for the rest of the night to play games while Hikari puts up with Kei. Hours later, they finally go up to his room, but just as Hikari tries to talk about love, he sees that Yuyudo has already fallen asleep off, so he decides to bring it up later. The next day, Iroha reminisces on how she had always been a hollow chick who only attracted people with her good looks. At first, it was cool being the girl everyone wanted, but at some point, she got tired of hearing the same confessions over and over again, so she started asking guys why they loved her. As expected, they would all give her some shallow reason, like the fact that she often talked to turtles in the class aquarium. Despite this, she continued sucking faces with anyone she thought looked good enough, including dudes old enough to pass as senior citizens. Much later, she dated this one guy who seemed genuinely interested in what she had going on mentally. But just as she tried opening up to him, he tried to smash, causing her to realize that they all just wanted her cookie. After her trip down memory lane, she takes a look at Hikari, who is currently wondering why she suddenly called him out to the park, and realizes that everything changed when he entered her life. The next moment, she asks if she is now banned from his room since he has not invited her over in a while, but he freaks out after recalling what he almost did the last time they were in a room together. When she tells him that it's something they have to do eventually, he runs away and refuses to sit with her until she promises to punch him if he ever tries to clap her again. Minutes later, they see Kaoru holding hands with Anzu, and after he tells Hikari not to act like it's a big deal, Anzu thanks Hikari for looking after Misuya. After Kaoru takes her away to avoid more of Hikari's awkward staring, he tells Iroha that his life has always felt a lot slower than everyone else's, so she suggests going out to something fun. Much later, she watches as he passionately sings at a karaoke place and realizes that she is a lot more attracted to him than when they first started dating. At a bowling alley later on, she realizes that her nails got chipped from rolling so many balls, so Hikari grabs a clipper and drops to his knees to trim them all down. Seeing him in this position makes her imagine what life together would look like, but then he suddenly grabs both her hands and says he is finally ready to fully commit to her. With only 3 months left until she leaves, he kisses her on the forehead and promises himself to make sure it's the best 3 months of their lives. The following week, Yuyudo shows Hikari tickets for a movie they have both been waiting for and gets excited to see it. But Hikari unfortunately won't be able to make it because he has to visit the cemetery with Kei and Kaoru on the same day as the movie. When he suggests going with Sumi since she also likes the movie, Yuyudo freaks out and says it won't be the same as going with him. However, after Hikari apologizes for assuming, Yuyudo realizes that he overreacted again, In the garden later on, he hides behind a bush to build up his confidence for a couple of minutes before finally jumping out and asking Sumi to go see the movie with him. After she says yes, he runs off but suddenly stops after noticing the smile on her face. Hikari also sees this and wonders if she is the girl he developed feelings for. But then Arisa scares him, so he runs off. On the way home, he continues thinking about how Yuyudo might be in love with Sumi until Iroha screams his name to bring him back to reality. She then asks for another date and says she really enjoyed the last weekend, so he asks if she would like a movie date. After she says yes, he decides to start planning for one while Arisa, who has been stalking them, gets jealous because she still hasn't found anyone to fall in love with. Just then, Shun shows up and compliments her before asking if she is currently dating anyone. When she says no, he asks her to go out this weekend. Days later, she heads out with a complete makeover and waits for random strangers to obsessively stare at her before getting excited to go see Shun. Around the same time, Yuyudo reaches the movie venue and starts regretting his decision to ask Sumi out. But then she shows up and admits to feeling excited that he asked her to come see the movie with him. Hours later, Arisa gets pissed at herself for thinking a loser like Shun would ever take her seriously. But as she decides to head home, Masuya shows up and asks if she wants to get ramen with him. She first acts like eating ramen with her outfit is unclassy, but as he turns to leave, she drops the baddie act and chases after him. By then, Yuyudo and Sumi have just finished with the movie, so they find a spot to get snacks. And as she starts yapping about how good the movie was, Yuyudo sneaks in a joke about how it almost seems like a date. But when she asks him to repeat the joke, he gets scared and acts like he forgot what he just said. At school the following week, he tries to tell Hikari how good the movie was, but then Sumi shows up to return his ticket stub. She then tells Hikari how much fun the movie was, and thanks Yuyudo for inviting her before asking Hikari to see the next one with her. She quickly realizes her mistake and apologizes before running off. But Yuyudo gets his heart shattered and walks to his seat. Hikari then spends the entire night thinking of ways to help him before calling Iroha and suggesting that they go on a picnic date with Yuyudo and Sumi. Days later, they all head to the park and, after setting up a spot and laying out all the food, Sumi asks why they didn't bring Arisa along. Hikari then says she is definitely busy with something, but Yuyudo quickly notices his weird behavior and guesses that there must be another reason why he suddenly called them out. The next moment, he grabs Iroha and runs off to get drinks, but after hiding behind a tree, he tells her to leave them both alone for a while. She then asks if he wants to get them to like each other, and after he denies it, she claims she had the same idea. He then admits to it and says she is a genius, but she calls him dumb for falling for an obvious trap and says he is being insensitive because it hasn't even been up to a month since Sumi confessed her feelings for him. After punishing him for being clueless again, they get the drinks and return to the picnic spot. But instead of another awkward conversation, she suggests playing a game to pass the time. Hours later, Hikari gets on a train with Yuyudo, who then asks for the real reason behind the sudden call for a picnic. After he admits that it was to set him up with Sumi, Yuyudo tells him that it only makes him look pathetic for not making a move by himself. Hikari then realizes that he just made everything worse again and thinks back to 2 years ago when Yuyudo said he would never be able to fall in love with a real girl because of how obnoxious they all are. The next moment, the train stops and Yuyudo suddenly jumps out, so Hikari chases after him and almost strangles him before saying that he has always wanted to see him happy because he is the only guy who chose to stick with him when everyone else called him a weird otaku. He then admits that his actions were insensitive, as always, but also explains to Yuyudo that all he wants is to help him find happiness like he has with Iroha. Upon hearing this, Yuyudo starts bawling his eyes out and admits to feeling scared that it won't work out with Sumi. So Hikari decides to gear him out instead of trying to fix everything. On the way to school the next day, he tells Iroha all about, and after she commends him for helping Yuyudo, a smoking hot Chad named Chika shows up and fractures his face with a nasty punch. While he struggles to stay conscious and wonders if Chika is a jealous ex, Chika asks Iroha if Hikari is a new stalker. She then tells him that Hikari is her boyfriend and helps him up before properly introducing Chika, who is actually her younger brother. When he suddenly drags her away, she promises to explain things to him and tells Hikari to head home without her. Later, she gets pissed at him and asks why he would do such a thing. So he explains that he never expected her to date someone so ugly and says he came back home because he was worried about her. The next day, Hikari notices that all the girls are obsessing over some guy at the gate. so he goes to check it out and sees Chika. After he says that Iroha is currently having a class, Chika says he actually came to see him and asks why he is still wearing his broken glasses. Hikari then takes them off and explains that they were a gift from his grandmother, which is why he doesn't use any random pair of glasses. The next moment, Chika snatches it from his face and walks off, leaving Hikari confused. However, after classes, they meet up at a restaurant, and after Chika returns the glasses with brand new lenses, Hikari tells him to get straight to the point because he is not a fan of staring contests. Chika then tells him how Iroha claimed to love everything about him and also how she showed him the lei figure he made for her birthday. This causes Hikari to think Chika has finally accepted him, but then Chika tells him to end the relationship because his sister is obviously way past the point of being entertained by such low-quality behavior from a love interest. The next day, Yuyudo hides behind a bush again to stalk Sumi, but after she spots him, he jumps out and starts a random conversation about the weather. He then tries to ask her out again, but when she interrupts him and says she would love to go out with everyone again, he chickens out. Just then, Hikari sees them talking and thinks Yuyudo is finally making his move. But just a couple of minutes later, Yuyudo ends up at the locker, beating himself up for not being bold enough to tell Sumi about his feelings. Later on, Hikari gives Arisa a call and says he needs help, so she agrees to come see him on the condition that he has to buy her a parfait. After getting her parfait at a restaurant, she asks what he wants, so he tells her that he can't think of a new gesture to prove how serious his love for Iroha is. She then tells him to get a ring, and when he says it will look way too simple, she explains how important rings are. Suddenly starts bawling her eyes out because no guy has ever gotten her a ring before. After thanking him for the advice, Hikari decides to sell all his games at home to get Iroha a ring, but Arisa tells him to just get a job at her uncle's amusement park. The next day, he starts working as a mascot and actually finds the experience very fulfilling. However, when Iroha tries to walk home with him the next day, he turns her down and says they won't be able to do that for a while. Naturally, she gets upset, but then he reminds her that Chika still hates his guts and says he has to do what is necessary to improve the quality of their relationship. After days of trying to see him, she decides to sleep at his table whenever she gets the chance, and he also uses the opportunity to get her ring sized. When she eventually gets back home, Chika asks why she has been coming back early the past few days, so she tells him about Hika, and he says something about expecting things between them to turn out this way. She gets confused by this, so he tells her about the conversation they had at the restaurant, and she angrily throws a towel at him before telling him to remember that he is only her brother, which means he doesn't get a say in her love life. After pinning her to the wall, Chika reminds her that he isn't her real brother since they are not related by blood, but she insists that he still has no right over who she chooses to date and walks off. The next day, Yuyudo spaces out during sports and thinks about his miserable love life until a stray ball turns his lights off. Much later, he wakes up in the infirmary and recalls how the guys mocked him after the ball hit. But then Iroha shows up to check on him and also asks about how he felt during the picnic they had the other day. After she apologizes for not asking sooner, he tells her that Hikari has definitely changed a lot about her and further explains how he has grown to realize that nothing about his current life will change until he starts facing the harsh truths he desperately tries to avoid. In a bold attempt to break out of his shell, Yuyudo tells Iroha that she is also a friend he loves dearly, and she gladly accepts his feelings. Afterwards, she stops Hikari from leaving and asks why he has stopped walking home with her. He then tries to avoid the conversation, but then she tells him to stop paying attention to Chika because she doesn't want to break up with him, despite whatever Chika has told him. Upon hearing this, Hikari explains that he wanted to wait until he got the perfect one and suddenly pulls out a ring box before saying that he got a little too excited and got it yesterday. As she starts crying, he realizes that it's up to him to decide how important and meaningful their relationship is, so he slides it on her finger and kisses her passionately while she sobs and places her hand on his heart. Hours later, they meet up with Yuyudo, Arisa, and Misuya at his favorite ramen place to get dinner and catch up on everything that happened recently. Has Chika really been worried about Iroha all this time, or does he want to take her from Hikari the same way Misuya wanted to? Comment part 2 to find out, and don't forget to hit the like button and turn on post notifications so you never miss any of our videos.